When a woman is with a narcissistic husband, she often finds herself living in two worlds, the one he shows to others and the one she quietly endures at home. In public, he's the attentive partner. He opens doors, gives compliments, and tells stories about how much he adores her. People around them may even say, "You're so lucky to have him." But in private, that same man may be dismissive, critical, or emotionally unavailable. This is the painful paradox. His love is not a partnership, it is a performance. The gestures, the words, the displays of affection are not about building a relationship. They are about protecting his image. He is more concerned with how the world perceives him than with how his wife feels when no one else is around. Over time, this split reality erodes her trust in love itself. She starts to feel the loneliness of being unseen in her own marriage. She wonders, why does he act like he loves me so deeply in front of everyone else, but behind closed doors I feel invisible? That gap between what is shown and what is lived is where pain grows. The woman begins to question herself. She wonders if she's ungrateful, too needy, or imagining things. She may even feel guilt because everyone else thinks she has the perfect marriage. This is one of the cruelest forms of emotional manipulation because it forces her to carry the weight of silence while he basks in admiration. But here's the truth. Real love does not need an audience. Real love shows up in the small, private, quiet moments when no one is watching. Real love is not a role someone plays. It is a presence that is consistent, honest, and vulnerable. And until she can see the difference, she may confuse performance with partnership. One of the most disorienting experiences for a woman with a narcissistic husband is realizing that the things he presents as love or care are often owed in control. At first, it might even feel flattering. He says things like, "I just want to protect you," or "I only say this because I love you." On the surface, those words sound kind, even protective. But over time, she notices a pattern. Their relationship isn't about freedom or growth. It's about his dominance being disguised as concern. He comments on what she wears, suggesting her clothes are too revealing or not classy enough. He questions her friendships, implying certain people aren't good influences. He even dictates how she should spend her time, where she should go, when she should be home, and how she should behave. And every time she resists, he reminds her that it's because he cares so much. This is where the trap lies. She starts doubting her instincts. Instead of hearing the warning bells that say, "This is control," she begins to tell herself, "Maybe he's right. Maybe I really can't trust my own judgment." Slowly, his control erodes her independence, and she mistakes his restrictions for protection. But true care never chains you down. It frees you. Real love encourages individuality, respects choices, and celebrates the unique identity of both partners. When care becomes a cage, it is no longer love. It is control dressed up in the language of devotion. And here's the hard truth. The most dangerous part of control, disguised as care, is how it convinces her to participate in her own silencing. She begins to shrink herself, to edit her decisions, to second-guess her worth, all in the name of keeping the peace. But love was never meant to shrink us. Love is meant to expand us. In many relationships, when conflict arises, two people may step back, take time, and then come back together to repair. But with a narcissistic husband, conflict doesn't lead to repair. It often leads to punishment. And the punishment doesn't come through raised voices or obvious anger. Instead, it comes through silence, through distance, through the quiet withdrawal of love. He knows exactly how to make her feel invisible. When she sets a boundary, when she dares to disagree, or when she simply expresses a need, he retreats emotionally. He may stop speaking to her for days. He may withhold affection, intimacy, or even basic kindness. His message is clear. Love will only return when you fall back in line. This form of emotional withholding is devastating because it conditions her to equate love with compliance. She begins to fear honesty. She begins to edit herself, avoiding her own truth just to avoid his silence. Instead of expressing her needs, she suppresses them. Instead of standing in her dignity, she bends to keep the peace. She starts to confuse the absence of conflict with the presence of love, when in reality, what she's experiencing is manipulation. And here's the deeper wound. Emotional withholding teaches her that love is conditional, that her value depends on obedience, that her worth depends on silence. But this is not love. Love does not disappear when we make mistakes. Love does not withdraw when we set boundaries. Love does not punish honesty. It welcomes it. The tragedy of this dynamic is that she becomes starved for even the smallest scraps of affection. A single kind word, a simple touch, a return to normalcy feels like a reward, when in truth it is the bare minimum of what love should always be. Emotional withholding may look quiet, but it is loud in its impact. It trains her to betray herself in order to stay connected to him. And yet the tisine. Ruth remains. Real love does not punish, it heals. Real love does not withhold, it gives. Real love does not make us walk on eggshells. It gives us the freedom to stand firmly on solid ground. One of the most painful and confusing experiences a woman faces with a narcissistic husband is gaslighting, the subtle, relentless twisting of truth until she no longer trusts her own mind. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly, almost invisibly, like a fog that makes her lose sight of her own reality. It begins with small denials. I never said that, even though she remembers the exact words. Or, you're too sensitive, after he's just belittled her. At first, she tries to argue her truth, to stand her ground. But over time, she grows exhausted. The arguments go nowhere. Each denial chips away at her certainty. Eventually, she begins to question herself. Maybe I did misunderstand. Maybe I really am overreacting. Maybe the problem is me. This is the cruel genius of gaslighting. It doesn't just silence her voice. It makes her doubt that she ever had one to begin with. It dismantles her inner compass, leaving her lost in a maze where every turn leads back to him. She starts to rely on his version of reality more than her own because hers feels unreliable, unstable, and constantly dismissed. The damage of gaslighting runs deeper than confusion. It creates shame. She feels ashamed for being too emotional, ashamed for misremembering, ashamed for being not strong enough to handle the relationship. Shame convinces her that she is broken, when in truth she is being broken down. But here's the truth that gaslighting tries to bury. Her reality is valid. Her feelings are valid. Her memory, her intuition, her voice, they are not flaws. They are her anchors. Gaslighting works only when she begins to believe that she cannot trust herself. Healing begins when she reclaims her right to say, I know what I felt, I know what I heard, I know what I saw, and I trust myself again. Gaslighting may dismantle her reality for a time, but it can never destroy her truth. A narcissistic husband often thrives on appearances. To the outside world, he looks like the perfect partner. He tells everyone how much he adores his wife, how she is the reason for his success, how he couldn't imagine life without her. He holds her hand in public, posts pictures that look like fairy tales, and praises her in front of others. From the outside, people admire their marriage. Friends say, "You're so lucky. He clearly loves you so much." And she smiles politely, nodding, while inside she feels the weight of a truth no one sees. Because behind closed doors, that same man who praises her so loudly in public may neglect her in private. In the quiet of their home, she feels unseen. Her emotional needs go unanswered. Her voice is dismissed. Her pain is minimized. He may even belittle her, criticize her, or withdraw altogether. The stark contrast between public adoration and private neglect creates a kind of emotional whiplash. She wonders, if he can treat me with such kindness in front of others, why can't he love me that way when it's just us? This duality creates shame. She begins to question herself. Maybe I am expecting too much. Maybe I should just be grateful that at least he says kind things about me to others. She carries the secret loneliness of being unloved in the very place where she should feel safest, her marriage. But here is the truth. Public validation is not the same as private intimacy. A husband who praises his wife for the world to see but neglects her heart in private is not loving her. He is using her. He is using her as a prop to maintain his image, not honoring her as a partner to build a life with. Real love doesn't need an audience. Real love doesn't perform for applause. Real love shows up consistently in the quiet mornings, in the late night conversations, in the ordinary moments that no one else will ever see. Because AC is not built on performance, it is built on presence. And the deepest wound for a woman in this dynamic is not what the world sees, it's what the world doesn't see. It's the loneliness of lying in bed next to someone who calls her his everything in public, but treats her like nothing in private. That is not love. It is neglect wrapped in performance. One of the most heartbreaking realities of being with a narcissistic husband is how what should feel like love slowly begins to feel like fear. In the beginning, she may have felt chosen, adored, even cherished. But as the years pass, she notices a shift. She is no longer free to be herself. Instead, she is constantly managing him, adjusting herself, measuring every word and action so as not to provoke his anger, his silence, or his withdrawal. She lives in a constant state of anticipation. What mood will he be in today? Will he approve of how I look? Will I say the wrong thing? Will this turn into another silent treatment? Her nervous system is always on alert. This is not the safety love is supposed to provide. This is survival. When love turns into fear, a woman learns to abandon pieces of herself. She quiets her laughter if it annoys him. She hides her dreams if they threaten him. She silences her truth if it displeases him. She sacrifices authenticity for peace, dignity for approval, and self-respect for survival. And in the process, she begins to disappear, not because she wants to, but because she feels she has to. The tragedy is that she may not even realize how much fear has replaced love until one day she notices how small she has become inside her own life. What once felt like passion now feels like walking on eggshells. What once felt like protection now feels like a prison. But here's the truth. Love and fear cannot coexist. Real love never asks us to shrink, to silence ourselves, or to abandon who we are. Real love is safety. Real love is freedom. Real love is the place where we are fully seen and fully accepted. The courage she needs is not to make him love differently. That is beyond her con. One of the most subtle yet devastating ways a narcissistic husband treats the woman he claims to love is by isolating her. At first, it may not look like isolation at all. It may come disguised as deep love. And he says things like, I just want you all to myself, or we don't need anyone else, we have each other. It feels romantic in the beginning, almost flattering, but over time she notices that her friendships have thinned, her family sees her less, and her world has grown smaller. The isolation doesn't always happen overnight. Sometimes it's gradual. He criticizes her closest friends, planting seeds of doubt about their loyalty. He complains about her family, saying they don't respect him, so she spends less time with them to avoid conflict. Slowly, she starts canceling plans, distancing herself from support systems, and shrinking her circle until, without even realizing it, she has no one left to turn to. And here's the most painful part. Once she is isolated, she becomes more dependent on him. He becomes her only source of validation, approval, and connection. That's exactly how he wants it, because if she has no one else, she is easier to control. The impact of this isolation is profound. A woman who once laughed freely with friends, confided in her family, and felt grounded in her community now feels alone in her struggles. And when she finally questions the relationship, she feels trapped because there's no one to remind her of who she used to be before his control took root. But here's the truth. Isolation is not love, it is captivity. Real love never asks us to cut ties with the people who care about us. Real love celebrates our connections, supports our friendships, and encourages us to stay grounded in community. Because love is not about creating dependence, it's about creating strength. When she begins to rebuild her support system, even in small ways, she starts to reclaim her power. A single phone call to an old friend, a visit with a family member, a conversation with someone who sees her truth. These moments can be the cracks where light begins to break through. Isolation may have been his weapon, but connection will always be her path back to freedom. A narcissistic husband often avoids accountability by skillfully shifting the blame onto the woman he claims to love. No matter what happens, somehow it always becomes her fault. If he lashes out, it's because she pushed his buttons. If he withdraws, it's because she wasn't supportive enough. If the marriage feels empty, he points to her flaws, her mistakes, her failures. Over time, this constant blame becomes exhausting. She begins to internalize his narrative. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am too difficult. Maybe I really am unlovable. The tragedy is that she starts carrying his shame on her back as if it belongs to her. She bends herself into impossible shapes, trying harder and harder to fix what was never hers to fix. The cruelest part is how this blame erodes her sense of identity. Instead of seeing herself as a whole and worthy person, she sees herself through his distorted lens. And because she loves him, or at least the version of him she once believed in, she accepts responsibility for his wounds, his moods, his unhappiness. But here's the truth. Love does not blame. Love does not say, you are the reason I hurt you. Love takes responsibility. Love says, I was wrong. I am sorry. I will do better. Accountability is a hallmark of real love, and without it, what exists is not love, it is manipulation. When a woman finally recognizes that the blame is not hers to carry, something powerful shifts. She begins to separate his story from her truth. She begins to see that his inability to love well is not evidence that she is unworthy. It is evidence that he is unwilling to grow. Releasing blame is not about excusing him. It is